Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Humble pranams at the lotus feet of our beloved Amma. It is my great pleasure to warmly invite you to the 4th National Annual Conference SPASHT 2021. Great leaders don't set out to be leaders, they set out to make a difference. It is never about the role, but always about the goal. And today, we are honored by the presence of our esteemed panelists. Now, I am going to introduce the moderator for today's session, that is Dr. Colonel Vishal Marwaha. He's a veteran of Indian Army for 28 years. He did MBBS and MD from the prestigious Armed Forces Medical College, Pune, DNB in Internal Medicine, 2 years fellowship in rheumatology at AIIMS, Delhi, short-term training at Nottingham, UK. He was awarded Chief of Army Staff Commandant in 2012 and Army Commander Commendation twice in 2008 and 2010, and currently our beloved principal at Amrita Institute of Medical Sciences, Kochi for the past 5 years. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Arinama. Om Amriteshwaraya Namaha. Humble pranams at the lotus feet of dear Amma. We welcome you all to the panel discussion on leadership challenges. We all know that there are no born leaders. Leadership is an evolution. From I, it becomes we. Team spirit becomes the main characteristic. One learns to fight adversity. Failure does not deter. We value each of our team members and learn to give a sound hearing to everyone. In today's panel discussion, we have leaders from different spheres. The students must learn that the success in life, in addition to being a good professional, we need to hone leadership qualities. To run a team successfully is the hallmark of good leadership. When I look at my own 28 years of military service and 5 years at AIIMS, Kochi, I got the opportunity to serve under nearly 20 commandants or commanding officers. I realized that being true to yourself is very important for a team leader. In Indian Army, from my childhood days, I used to see, my father was also in the army, my elder brother, my uncles, 3 of them. So I used to see Imandari, Wafadari and Sharafat written on boards in many cantonments. After 30 years, I still feel honesty, organizational loyalty and humility are great values and virtues. Being a devotee of Amma for last 12 years, I have also understood that the Sadguru is one of the greatest leaders. She has transformed the lives of millions of people all over the world with her love and compassion. Today we have with us in the panel discussion 5 very eminent members who have demonstrated exceptional leadership. They are Dr. Peter Patel, Brigadier S.V. Bhaskar Veer Chakra, Dr. Shamika Ravi, Dr. Sanjeev Singh, and Dr. Aravind Sukumar. They will be speaking in the above order. Actually, Dr. Shamika Ravi, she has informed that she had some, had to go in urgently somewhere, so she may join in later. Each panelist will speak for about 12 minutes and question answers will be taken after that. But sometimes the questions come later also, so we will keep, discussing it as we move on. The organizing committee of SPASHT warmly welcomes all the panelists. To start with, Dr. Peter Patel will be addressing us. Dr. Peter Patel is the founder and international director of the Faculty of Disaster Medicine, India and Nepal, and has special interest in training in disaster medicine and planning. His expertise includes disaster preparedness, epidemics and pandemics, healthcare resilience in disasters, chemical and biological disasters, and risk reduction. He is visiting professor for disaster medicine at the Sri Ramachandra Institute of Higher Education and Research, Chennai, and he is also joint chair of the academic board for disaster medicine at Srihar, Chennai and AIMS, Kochi. We have had the great opportunity to work with him, and he has guided us in this subject. In his regular work, he is specialist consultant for healthcare sector in UK, development director of SBS Dental Group with over 25 years of experience in the NHS. I will request Dr. Peter Patel to begin his deliberations.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's good morning over here in Birmingham, United Kingdom. And what I'm going to go through is I'm going to share a presentation with you, which is going to actually talk about a little of my experience, how I actually got into the leadership area and some basic principle of leadership. So when we're looking at medical leadership or clinical leadership, first thing a young person should do is to try and understand leadership, different styles of leadership, different way, all different areas of leadership, and they can start actually looking at how they can shape themselves. So if I can just now share the screen now. Okay, I'm assuming that the slideshow is actually being seen by everybody. That's just basic my background, which was already mentioned. Now, if you do really, go out and look for leaders and leadership world out there on that Google, you'll find hundreds and hundreds, thousands of people who have had different leadership roles. The top bit are also world leaders, political leaders, and leaders in the Facebook, leaders in Twitter domain, you will find them in it. So when people talk about leaders, when I ask my students and other people, who do you admire in terms of a leader? And 90% of them come up with a political leader. About another, say, 10% of maybe some of the people actually look for a sporting leader. But very rarely do I find people identifying a clinical leader as somebody whom they aspire to be. And so what you have to do is to really think, well, there are leaders, but in my own field, who are the leaders? How did they get there? What do they really do? My experience came in the NHS. I was there for 22 years in academia, and then I went to NHS to some work and had the opportunity to join the West Midlands RCGP faculty. It was a leadership program in 2008. And it's the first time, actually, I had to look at it academically and practically, what leadership was all about. So I was one of the 10 champions, and we were allocated 10 sort of learners or developers. We were actually not even champions. We were actually associates mentoring, okay? So the key point I'm trying to make here is that there are lots of places which they say they teach leadership, train leadership. In my opinion, you cannot train people in leadership. Leadership is mostly innate, but you can mentor, you can develop, you can nurture leadership. And that's my personal view. So if you do a leadership definition on Google, look at it. So 9,890 million results in 0.66 seconds. Now, what can you go through, and what can you actually bring out of that? And it's a very, very difficult area now with the Google and knowledge that you have so many publications. Many are very good. Many of them absolutely useless. So if I go through, leadership has been defined as an influence, a power relationship in which power of one party, the leader, promotes movement and change in the others, which are the followers. So it actually makes assumptions very clearly saying a leadership has followers. But then we have leadership in management. And there is actually also difference between leaders and managers. So there's more traditional now corporate management and corporate leadership. There is a managerial view of leadership is something possessed or owned by an individual who, due to their role or authority. So if you have a head of a department, you have, say, medical director, or you have various, roles in the corporate company, then they believe that that manager role is a leadership role, and because they have an authority. Again, so, I would suggest that you sort of think about it. But if you look at the bottom pictures over there, the one on the left, you should be able to recognize that. It's the head of the WHO currently. And then on the political side, in the middle, another leader, no other than Modi. The third one, Ambani. And then none other than our head of our defense forces out there. And all of them are in different organizations with different role of leadership, but they actually have different styles to actually carry out their own. They're the most successful leaders around the world today. So another sort of, what is leadership? So some other definitions, like Peter Drucker, the only definition of a leader is someone who has followers. Very, very narrow. Warren Bennis, leadership is the capacity to translate vision to reality. Well, yes, yeah, you should have a vision, which you can, but then there are some limitations which I won't go into right now. Bill Gates, as we look ahead into the next century, leaders will be those who empower others. Absolutely, that's a good one, but it's a lot more than that. And John Maxwell, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. So these are all good definitions, but on its own, they don't make just a leader, okay? There's a lot more to it. So something here about which is the sort of negative part or not real. Okay, leadership has nothing to do with seniority or a person's position in the hierarchy of a company. That's one opinion. Leadership has nothing to do with titles. Leadership isn't management. Okay, and there is difference between leadership and management leadership and management administration. Leadership has nothing to do with personal attributes. Now that's a very questionable one, it has got nothing to do, because in some cases, people do actually get pointed to leadership position without attributes, just by position or influence. Leadership by birth, royalty, those people, people who come out, they are by birth descendant out there. And then you really got to understand leadership in a formal and informal organization. So formal organization like corporate, informal organizations which are sports associations and various others, or NGOs, or many of those. And so there's a leadership which is, how do leaderships in this organization work? So when I first started, I had to really think, what are the leadership theories? And there were three theories. Trait theory, and I'm not going to go into details. You'll have the slides for you to look at later. And so trait theory, some personality traits lead to people becoming natural leadership roles, okay? Great event theory, okay? In which a crisis or important event may cause a person to rise to occasion, which brings out extraordinary leadership in ordinary person. This happens in disasters. People, they've never had a leadership role, but suddenly something happens, and then some of the people rise to the leadership role to enable the community to actually face the crisis, and including in wars where the refugees are there and that. So that's one. And the third one is transformational theory. People can choose to become leaders. People can learn leadership skills. This is mostly to do with the universities and colleges who teach, saying, we are going to train you to be leaders. Okay. So leadership concept, good leaders are made, not born. Okay, and again, you can have a debate about it. If you have a desire and willpower, you can become an effective leader. Okay, so that's another one. To inspire your workers into higher levels of teamwork, there are things the leader must do, must know, and must do. Okay, so must be. And again, that is an essential, necessary trait. Does not come naturally. Now, people actually saying, well, no, there are people to whom that comes naturally. Others have got to be coached and actually help with it. It's acquired through continual work and study. Maybe, yes, you have to acquire knowledge, you have to acquire skills to be able to actually become a good leader. Okay, so next thing is that there are 12 leadership styles, and I'm not going to go through this, but this is just next to the 3 slides. So one of these laissez-faire, okay, that's one of those leadership styles. Let it be, leave it be. Bureaucratic leader, charismatic leader, autocratic leader, democratic leader, people-oriented leader, task-oriented leader, a servant leader, transformational leader, and transactional leader, environmental leader. Okay, and what most people do like is the situational leader, which is the Joseph Praveen Kumar Hersey, which says is a leader that uses different leadership styles depending on the situation, type of employee that is being supervised. Okay, so that is one of the most popular one. But again, as I said, I don't need to, this is what I had to go through, learn more with these particular styles and types in detail to be able to actually help my associates to actually saying, this is what it's all about, but now let's see how we can actually coach you, how we can mentor you into leadership. So looking at sort of leadership and management, I said, okay, so not all managers are leaders. Many managers, and a lot of them in corporate sectors and government administrative sectors, are just bureaucratic administrators. They have no leadership skills. They just do, they're pen pushers, they're regulators, and that's all they do. So it is just one of the most basic. A leader is visionary, passionate, creative, inspiring, innovative, courageous, imaginative, experimental, independent, shares knowledge, trusting, warm, and radiant. Okay, initiators. Whereas a manager, rational, businesslike, persistent, tough-minded, analytical, structured. So those are the kind of things which academics have identified as difference between a leader and a manager. Okay, so now coming to what is medical leadership? Okay, when I looked at it saying, okay, in my sort of medical leadership is not just simply about ensuring change that will benefit patient care. This is something which we actually identified, saying medical leadership is about providing one, high quality of clinical and safe care, influencing change and innovation for individual patients, the community and the community you serve, and improving population health for the greater good of the region. So that is a very big, broad definition of medical leadership, which actually goes across the whole healthcare spectrum. Okay, so when you come to sort of leadership, you'll find medical leadership, lots of books over here. Okay, these are just a few examples I've actually picked out. And also there are also what we call medical sheet, a toolkit for service development, system transformation. Okay, another one, and you'll find plenty of that. So what have you got to do is, along with your mentors and tutors, choose the right literature to be able to make it effective for you to develop your leadership skill, fine tune it. Over here, NHS, we have a leadership academy, okay? And we have a clinical leadership competency framework, and we also have a medical leadership competency framework. And out there, it actually says, okay, so there are 3 career stages that are identified in the medical profession, up to the end of undergraduate training, end of postgraduate training, and up to 5 years of continuing education. So this framework has been developed for that. And they always will start with this on the right-hand side. What is it all about? Okay, delivering the service. So they're focused on NHS delivering the service, but not the broader aspect of medical world and actually the healthcare, internationally or wider world. So they have all these, okay, but it's a very, very good competency framework, which I have seen. And the framework has been built on the concept of shared leadership, where leadership is not restricted to people who hold designated leadership role, and it's a shared responsibility for the success of the organization and its services. And what I'm going to propose to do later on, with the help of Professor Mawa, is these books are available with permission from NHS Improvement Group. And we would like to get this book out there from there with permission to use it, but adopt it for our medical students and interns for the Indian system and see what can we actually learn from this rather than reinventing the wheel. So we'll try and do that. Okay. So what we can say is introduce a formal medical leadership training course using the NHS academies. Okay. And it could be a starting point, a 3 days foundation course for medical students, interns, and allied health workers. Okay. Here at the bottom left is a doctor in Pune, whom we have worked with. There are a group over there, and is out there in rural regions distributing face masks to the community for the COVID-19 pandemic. And something like 10,000 face masks have been actually distributed between Pune, Chennai, Madurai, and Orissa, Puri. So, but it requires kind of doctors and healthcare leadership to know what is required out there to lead and improve population health out there. On the middle right, on the right-hand side is part of our international team. Right in the middle is Professor James Kingsland. And these are, of course, some of you will recognize, these are your coachy people, your own lecturers and staff out there. And they have actually taken time off to actually learn about disaster medicine. So just because somebody has reached a certain level, they have not forgotten about continuous learning, lifelong learning. And these are the kinds of people who are leaders, but going to be will develop further as an aspiring leaders, inspirational leaders. So now to look at it, excellent leaders are, in simply, they're inspiring, they have integrity, they're effective communicators, they're supportive coaches and visionary. On top of that, they're stewards. They're customer focused, so that means patient focused, community focused. They're results oriented, and they have a sound judgment. And they're effective problem solvers, analytical thinkers, systematic thinkers, and innovative. But in a lot of these, characteristics, one thing people always actually forget is communicators, but they're not listeners. And in medical professional, it's always listening is very, very important. And second most important thing is lifelong learning. The science is changing so fast that you have to keep on learning to keep up to date, to ensure that you provide effective, safe, and good care for your patients as a leader. Okay, so some medical leadership challenges which we have identified: communication skills, listening. We found that that is absent in many people. Emotional intelligence, and something which people still do not understand. What is emotional intelligence when you're actually working with a team and leading the team? And you have to have understanding of emotional intelligence to be able to become an effective leader. Broad scanning, and this is something which is missing. People still remain in their narrow, role-oriented, department-oriented situation and don't do broad scanning of the area they're working in. Organizational culture, okay? It's again, there's an organizational culture is such that it's a task or a role. And majority of the systems around the world, including UK and India, is kind of a role culture. Okay, you're a head of a department, you're orthopedician, you're actually gynae, you're a surgeon, and just stick to your role. But what is important about medical leadership is the task. What is the task of that organization? And actually build a team on shared leadership. That's the most important thing. Market environment. So we have a challenge for medical leadership. Is it a private sector? Is it a public sector? Where am I going to go? And what are my challenges in the sector? Financial. Objective to earn money. It's a rat race. And it's a difficult one because many students spend lakhs and lakhs of rupees to get educated, but they have to actually pay some of that money back. So that is actually a barrier, you see. And then there are people who have ambition to be recognized, but absence of skills development. Well, the challenge thing is you need to be recognized, but you must actually have developed your skills. And then the people who chase success, not excellence. And a lot of people have said it, including Amir Khan has said in his film, chase excellence, don't chase success. Okay, and that is these are some of the challenges of leadership. So in summary, what you have to take into consideration is understand what is leadership and difference between management and leadership. Understand the concept of what is medical leadership, identify the challenges for medical leadership, set clear goals for leadership. And that's in summary. And here are from our work, up there on the top left, the Kochi leadership team. On the right, we have another South Indian team. Here, down at the bottom left, enhancing skills. And these are all qualified professionals doing that. And here in the middle, right in on the extreme right, the Vice Chancellor of Sri Ramachandra University. On his left is Professor James Kingsland. On the extreme right, there's a lady there, which is Professor Virginia Murray, who is from Public Health England, but is also works with WHO and UNICEF. And she has shown the leadership skills. Very, very important and most wanted person around the world, but she has taken time off to come to India to inspire and teach and mentor people out there. So, and we have two more Indians out there on the left-hand side, Professor Ramakrishnan and Kausif Thangawadi. And so what I'm examples over here are that we have leaders amongst you. They are there to help you. They are there to mentor you. And with that, I will end this particular presentation. I've just been in the time we have, I could only give you a kind of a little sample of the complexities of leadership and management, but it's not a difficult task. It's not impossible. Set your minds to it and you'll make it work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. It was an excellent deliberation, and I'm sure there will be a lot of questions coming. Next, we have Brigadier S.V. Bhaskar. He's a Veer Chakra awardee, Operation Vijay, an alumnus of the National Defence Academy, Pune. He did MBA from Faculty of Management Studies, Delhi University. He was commissioned in 13 JACREF in December 1985, commanded the same unit as a colonel, and he has also commanded a brigade in operational area. He has served in Jammu and Kashmir, Sikkim, Manipur, Rajasthan, Andaman Nicobar, Siachen Glacier, UN mission in Ethiopia and Eritrea. He was also an instructor in Indian Military Academy and in High Altitude Warfare School. For his meritorious service, he was awarded the Army Commander's Commendation Card twice, Chief of Army Staff Commendation Card, and Veer Chakra and Vijay, Kargil. He retired as Brigadier on 31 December 2020. In fact, Captain Vikram Batra, which many of our students are knowing, is from his same unit who got Paramveer Chakra in the Kargil operations. I know Brigadier Bhaskar for a long time, and I have interacted with him on more than 2 or 3 occasions, and I always remember that whenever I had interacted with him, he will always tell, there will be pearls of wisdom, lot of beautiful things he would tell, in which you remember, because when you are at a young age, those are the things which always help you in your career. Over to Brigadier Bhaskar.
Vishal, can you hear me?
Can hear you, sir.
Okay. First and foremost, Vishal, I would like to thank you for the kind words that you spoke about me, as well as for giving me this unique opportunity to be part of the panel discussion in which such esteemed members, all of whom are thorough professionals and absolutely dedicated to their noble profession, are panelists. Okay, first and foremost, if we ask the question to ourselves as to what is leadership, if we start defining leadership, each one of us will have our own definition. Dr. Patel himself had shown a number of definitions in his presentation. So all definitions will be different, but yet they will be correct in their own way. So therefore, I feel that leadership actually is too vast a concept to be given a precise or comprehensive definition. When we think of a leader, all of us have certain qualities in our mind. The list of qualities will actually be endless. But if we read through these qualities, we also realize that these qualities are, many of them are interlinked in their own way. And thus, the actual number of qualities we can, for simplicity purposes, we can limit them or quantify them to a manageable number. Now, having served in the Indian Army for 37 years, naturally my talks, my views will be centered towards leadership as it pertains to the armed forces. At the same time, I have no doubt that if not all, most of them in some form or other, to some extent or other, will be equally relevant and valid for every sphere of human endeavor. An important question arises, which was also addressed by Dr. Patel, as to whether the leaders are born or they are made. It was earlier thought that they are born. Those who were born in the royal families, born to kings, born to tribal chieftains, were considered to be automatic leaders. However, the experiences of the last few centuries has clearly proved beyond doubt that leaders are made. In fact, all human beings, all of us, have the leadership qualities in some measure or other, and it is actually a matter of how well it is further developed, further nurtured by interplay of a host of factors, which includes our upbringing at home, our interactions in our schools, our colleges, the influences which our peer group have over us, the very social environment in which we are living, and a very important factor I feel is the intrinsic, the inner motivation that we have. The armed forces has leaders at all levels, starting from a section commander who just leads 10 men, or a tank commander who just has 3 crew members. From that to large sized formations or organizations like a division, a corps, or even the army itself. Now, as far as the selection of leaders in the armed forces is concerned, it is of vital importance because you all will agree with me that armed forces are the last bastion, last resort of the nation. If for some reason the civil administration fails, we have the paramilitary forces which can take on. If the paramilitary forces fail, the armed forces can take on. But if the armed forces fail, the nation has no one else to fall on. It will be a doomsday for the nation. Therefore, the selection is very, very important. The leaders in the army are nurtured after they have been selected. Thereafter, they are nurtured and developed constantly. And this is a never-ending process, and this is carried out through hard training, a very, very strict regimentation, exacting standards of discipline. And leadership in the armed forces calls for exemplary standards, including making the supreme sacrifice of one's own life if required, by going even beyond the call of duty. The Indian Army is deservingly proud of its rich culture of leadership. Names like Major Somnath Sharma, Second Lieutenant Arun Khetrapal, Flying Officer Nirmaljit Singh Sekhon, and in the more recent memories, the names of Captain Vikram Batra, Captain Manoj Pandey. They are just a few names who have set very, very high standards of leadership by leading their men to victories against all odds with indomitable courage, giving up their life in the process. I am indeed proud to be part of the Indian Army and a part of the 13th Jammu Kashmir Rifle, to which Captain Vikram Batra belonged. And I was indeed very fortunate to have participated in the Kargil war, and in the rank of major as a company commander, I led my company in 2 successful attacks in the Dras and Mashko subsectors. The leaders in the army are expected to live up to the credo of Field Marshal Sir Philip Chetwood. This is important. I would like you to listen to it carefully. The credo says that the safety, honor, and welfare of your country comes first, always, and every time. The honor, welfare, and comfort of the men you command comes next. Your own ease, comfort, and safety comes last, always and every time. This is the kind of expectations that the leadership in army, the officers in this case, this is the kind of expectations from them. Now, as I said, there is no end to the qualities that one can expect or one can desire that an officer should have or a leader should have. But some of the more important qualities which I feel, which I am convinced are essential for a leader are his intelligence and reasoning ability so that he can comprehend situations and act upon them. A very, very high degree of sense of responsibility wherein he can go beyond the call of duty and even do the right thing even if it is not specifically expected of him or told to him. In a milieu like the armed forces, he has to be socially adaptable with people from all possible walks of life, different sections of society, and should be capable of keeping the organizational objective above his own personal goals. He should have extreme confidence, supreme confidence in his own abilities, should be capable of deciding quickly in times of crisis, taking initiative when required without awaiting orders. He should have physical and mental courage in abundance, and he should have determination of a very, very high order so that he can relentlessly pursue his goals against all the odds. Now, as I said, these are those qualities which I have listed. This is not endless, but these, to my mind, are some of the more essential ones. Now, coming on to the leadership in modern times, what are the challenges to it? As I said earlier, my talk may be concerning the armed forces more, but it equally applies to every walk of life today. First and foremost, it has to be understood that, as Dr. Patel also brought out, there is actually a lot of difference between being a leader and being a boss or a manager. But in the times to come, a manager or a boss will not be successful if he or she does not have the leadership qualities of the minimum desired level. The authority which a manager has, that alone will not help him lead his team successfully. Secondly, we are living in a dynamic world in which everything is changing too fast. A leader can be successful only if he keeps up with the latest in his field. That is, he has to have a deep knowledge of his own profession, and in addition, he has to have a reasonable know-how in the other fields too, so that he can earn the respect of his subordinates. Thirdly, he has to have a very, very deep sense of understanding, deep understanding of human psychology and human relations. What Dr. Patel said about emotional intelligence, I think, fits aptly into this. The leader has to set an example of the highest standard so that the subordinates look up to him. To be a successful leader, you have to be capable of going through all the pressures of being a leader without blinking an eyelid, keeping a cheerful countenance at all the times. The leader should have the courage to stand up for his values, stand up for his principles, and his subordinates should be capable, should be always be expecting him to be beside them at all times and not ditch them in a crisis situation. A leader has to be having very good mental and physical health. The high standards of leadership, which is that calls for a very high level of health, both mental and physical. Otherwise, the leader will not be able to withstand the pressures and he will get outweighed by them. And if he gets weighed down, he will not be able to lead his team successfully. And a leader has to be moving in the field. We can't possibly be having a leader in the future who's bound to his chair in an air conditioned office at all times. It will always help if the leader has an all round personality and if he has some sense of humor in his day to day dealings. A very, very important aspect of leadership challenges in modern times is the need to manage time successfully. A leader should be capable of laying down the right priorities, decentralizing as per the capability of his subordinates, and for this, he has to have faith in his own subordinates. He has to be tech savvy with a host of new technologies coming up every day. He has to be knowing all these, otherwise, he won't be able to utilize them to the optimum. Creativity and innovation, the way the world is moving, the way new things are coming, unless if the leader is creative and innovative, he won't be able to carve a niche for himself or for his organization in this dynamic world. And he should be able to manage change. There will always be resistance to change. He should be able to manage this, implement this by effectively guiding his organization, implement till it is implemented, and thereafter he has to be prepared for future changes also. Now, these are some of the qualities which I had listed, and I would once again like to emphasize that the challenges I have spoken about are not comprehensive, but only the more important ones, in my opinion. And equally importantly, I would once again like to stress that these are not limited to the armed forces only, but will apply to every facet of life, every walk of life, even to the extent of leadership in one's own small family. The leadership qualities are seen in every routine, day to day activities, from there to even the crisis situation. I'll be failing in my duties if at this juncture I do not mention the selfless devotion displayed by the medical fraternity at all times, being in the forefront of activities like a war, during the natural disasters like the floods, earthquakes, accidents, or during pandemic situation like the ongoing COVID pandemic. In the end, I would like to reiterate that leaders are not born but made. All of us have the leadership qualities. It is finally a matter of our own inner motivation, our self discipline, and perseverance, which will eventually decide as to what type of leader we will become. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. It was indeed very well spoken, and I think, as you very nicely brought out, that whatever the whether it is military leadership or leadership with other facets also, you see the basic principles are the same, and in fact all the points which you have mentioned are actually pertinent to every aspect of leadership. So I'm sure this would be very sort of, for when we look at the students, they are always looking forward to I think there are some questions, so I'll start with you. There's one question I think for Dr. Patel also. I'll just take one because for Brigadier Bhaskar. Sir, what are the small changes one can make in everyday life to build the quality of leadership in oneself?
Well, if most of you, I'm sure, are well read and would have read this Atomic Habits, that clearly gives us a path for self-improvement. Similarly, if we look at the qualities that I mentioned and what are the manifestations of those qualities, in which all way we can display those qualities and be truthful to oneself, we can become leader. And you brought out correctly, Vishal, and in fact, Dr. Patel has brought out very correctly that it is not overnight that one becomes a great leader. So first and foremost, we have to, for our own self, identify what all I require to be a good leader. Work hard in that way. A shortcut is not there to any success, including in becoming a successful leader. And some of the things which I mentioned in developing knowledge, in having the courage of conviction, in having the correct type of physical and mental health, and being open to learning and being capable of ditching ideas which are either wrong or old fashioned or are irrelevant in today's context. So it's a very slow, gradual, but a sure short process if one is determined and one is going to persevere over it.
Thank you, sir. And there's one question for Dr. Peter Patel. Sir, according to you, how can we improve our leadership qualities at the undergraduate level?
Well, one very simple thing. You have two goals. Well, main goal is to actually pass your medical college with excellence. Okay. The second goal you said is actually leadership. Okay. So now two things that you have is time management. Look at your day to day, how you're managing time, and what are the outcomes of every action you're taking. If you actually don't use your time management properly and it's not effective, you're not going to develop your leadership skills. So set a goal that I want to do this, what time, how I'm going to develop my skills. That's the most important thing. Second thing is that there's a lot of internet learning and good guidance and everything, coaching and even videos. So when you get time, look at it, look at different leaders. How do they behave? What do they do? And most important thing you will ever find is communication, communication, communication. Okay. What we do, which I have found in many Indian GPs who have come across here, is that if they want to say something, they will go back into like a patient history of 10 years. And it takes them 15, 20 minutes, half an hour to come to what they want to say. So think about what you want to say, what you want to communicate, but at the same time, as a student, if you're actually sitting there in a group, don't interrupt, listen to everybody. Then understand what they're saying and then have your input. That's the first skill, listening. I trust that will help you.
Thank you, sir. There's one more question for Brigadier Bhaskar. So, how to remain strong and calm in crisis situations?
Okay. First and foremost, one has to be trained. If you're trained in your job, whether it is in the corporate field, whether in the armed forces, in the medical field, the more trained you are, the more confidence you'll have. And that confidence itself will lead you to keep that calmness. Second is, suppose, an intrinsic quality, which again comes with time. You have to slowly develop it in simple things like, suppose we are just walking, the pen drops from our hand, the mobile drops, instead of fretting over it, instead of cursing, which all of us, even I do. We have to start with small things and slowly we can develop the habit of being calm and having a positive outlook at all times will ensure that you will not look at the negative consequences of your actions, you will not look into the future negatively. That will ensure that you will be calm. One of the ways to ensure. And the breathing exercises, which they say, they are very, very effective way. Even in the worst of crisis, if one takes a deep breath, the medical science behind it, you can tell better. But all these help. These are small techniques, but which are very, very successful, I feel.
Can I just add one thing for the undergraduate, please?
Sure, sir.
Okay. What is important, which was not there when I studied, okay, is mentorship. And I strongly recommend to undergraduate students and postgraduate students, or even intern, find yourself a good mentor, okay? And that mentor will guide you through the process. That's very, very important. And perhaps the Amrita Medical College can look at how to actually find good mentors for your undergraduate students with good leadership qualities.
Yes, sir. That's a very vital thing. We follow, in fact, we follow 1:5 mentorship. And in fact, when this COVID happened, like I was asking the interns also, like, do you need mentors? Because they said, no, yes, sir. Some of them told me, so I again assigned mentors to them also. So, you're right that always when you go and talk to them, a lot of their problems you come to know. Like sometimes, you are talking to a student and, you can make out that he's having mild depression, and immediately make a referral, and you find that he has depression, and with antidepressants, and in 2 to 3 weeks you can make a market improvement occurs in the individual. So sometimes you have to go by a lot of inputs coming. Sometimes the peers, the other day there was somebody who had some issue, and there was a faculty sitting with me when we were talking. So the roommate was, had brought her. So, one of the Dr. George Matthew was sitting with me. He was telling her that you are also very lucky that you have such a good roommate who is holding your hand and who has brought you here. So, you're right. Absolutely, sir. It's a very useful thing. And the mentorship is very important. And, what was also brought out by you, having role models, somebody to look up to. These are very important things, sir. And we believe that mentorship is very important, and we follow it in our institutes in a big ways.
No human being is immune to stress. Okay, everybody, whether he's army, air force, you name it, nobody is immune to stress. And we need mentors, someone to hold your hand through that without getting severe medical depression.
Correct. Absolutely. Very true. In fact, I always remember that I was telling you, like what you will hear, like even I remember, I think if it was a Brigadier Bhaskar was, I think, telling me, he would remember, I don't know if he remembers, it's, I think somewhere, I think, when he came to AFMC, this was way back in 87 or 88, he had come for some course. And he was telling that, he was telling me that when you're in a post, some people tend to drink more. And he says, no, one has to be very careful. You have to be, you should not, because that is the time when you can get into this alcohol habit. You are citing some example and telling. So it was like, so these kind of things, like at that time, I still remember, because when you are in some place, there's hardly anything happening, you can tend to get into alcoholism. And, we all know how many people, their life gets affected because of alcoholism. So that's, like whatever, when some good, I think, advice comes to you, we should, I think, take it on. So moving on to Dr. Sanjeev Kumar Singh. He's the medical superintendent at Amrita Institute of Medical Science, Kochi. He did his MBBS and Diploma in Child Health in Pediatrics from Savai Mansingh Medical College, Jaipur. Subsequently, he did his MPhil in Hospital and Health Systems Management from the Birla Institute of Technology and Sciences, Pilani, and PhD in Hospital Administration from Amrita Institute of Medical Sciences, Amrita Vishwavidyapeetham. He is an avid researcher, and his work in antibiotic stewardship is well known all over the world. He is the recipient of BMJ Award. He has also been, included in the top 100 medical leaders in the world. And he is also overseeing the administration of Amrita hospitals in Faridabad. In my own experience of last 5 years, we have worked together, and he is a very, firstly, has lot of knowledge and very calm. One of the questions one person asked was how to stay calm. I think he is a classic example, because when we face inspections, there will be a lot of challenges. So all those things, like there'll be some, everybody has so many things, you have to be able to give the right answer at the right time in so many situations. So in that regard, I've always seen that he has the absolute calm and composure to answer. So over to Dr. Sanjeev Singh.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vishal. I think it is just it's a great privilege and a pleasure to be participating, and thanks for the invitation. I always look up to you as one of the fantastic leaders, which fortunately Amrita has, and the way you connect with undergraduates, postgraduates, and build that relationships and reach out to all of them and with the faculty and staff is just amazing. So it's always a great learning experience with you. And thanks, Dr. Peter Patel and Brigadier Bhaskar. That was a very inspiring session and a great learning listening to you. I'll quickly share my slides, and I'll try and finish in an allocated time. And I'll concentrate on healthcare. And as there have been few questions within the healthcare setup, how is the leadership? And so let's look at this gentleman who is Ernest Armory Cortman. He is a general surgeon by profession, and he was at Harvard Medical School. Look at the year 1917, almost a century back. And this is the vision which a great leader should have. And he had written that the common sense notion is that every hospital should follow every patient till it treats long enough to determine whether or not the treatment has been successful. And this is what he said was an end result management technique. And he used to introspect his own surgical skill sets and outcome. The peers did not like it, and he was sort of thrown out of Harvard, but then he became a legend and went ahead and formulated American College of Surgery network and also Joint Commission accreditation for hospital organizations. So JCO, which is very popularly also known as JCI. And we now in India talk about patient-reported outcome measures. And this is somewhere in the 1970s and early 80s that ICOM, International Confederation for Health Outcome Monitoring.
This is Subuya.
Health outcome monitoring with Harvard Business School, and similarly NHS also adopted it. And now India talks about PROM and PREM, and which Ernest Codman cited almost a century back. And that's how the leadership is. So leaders, are they generally first? So they have been great, man. And they have been, like, printing press came in 1450, there's steam engine 1769. So they were very creative. Ilford novel Dynamite in 1866. And very recently, Bill Gates and Steve Jobs creating that personal computers and iPods. So there are huge examples within our century to understand how do they perform and what do they do. But what happens? How do these great leaders become great leaders? It's basically those ideas so we need to be open to any creativity, any ideas, whether it is vague, whether it is real, whether it is out of the box, within the box. These ideas are extremely important, and we need to also share these ideas to be able to create that difference. But believe me, an idea doesn't make any difference. So getting a new idea, creating a network, and creating then a big nexus is how a leader should be. And that is where the skill sets come in. So it is, one, you are self-aware. Second, you are open to ideas. Third, if there is a great idea which is going to work, which is out of the box, you're not shy about it. You create a network, because just one person won't be able to do. Together, it would be, you convert from I to we. Penicillin is a good case study, and this has been taught at Harvard Business School also. Alexander Fleming, he was looking at all those organisms. He was growing gram-positive staphylococci in a petri dish. And he went for a vacation and left those petri dish in his lab. When he came back, he realized that there has been those isolates have been sort of minimized by the presence of molds. And soon he realized that it is the penicillium which is killing these gram-positive cocci, and that there came an idea that can this be possible, that these organisms which leads to illnesses can be actually killed. And that is where in somewhere around 1926 in UK, and then he brought in this concept, he got the people together, he got uh, people to buy into this idea. But then that was just a mere idea. Then there is a gentleman called Henry Howard Florey who came in, and there is where they created a network, because just an idea won't make any difference. So he created a network, and soon it became that penicillin, if it is possible, then it could be post-Crimean, pre-World War situations. There would be these soldiers who could be saved from lobar pneumonia or wound infections. And then it became a network where from one vial of penicillin, which was a breakthrough at that particular time, they created somewhere around 40 vials, and that became a big path-breaking incident where they actually captured to how to treat infections. They then made 500,000 vials and then 8 billion vials. So there was one brilliant idea which came in when Alexander Fleming, and then there is how the leaders come in, they create a network, and then they roll out as a big thought. Can we learn from other industries? Yes, we can. This gentleman called Travis and Garrett Camp, who were basically attending session in Paris, and there was very heavy rainfall, and they were attending a session called LeWeb, where future is being crafted and curated. And when the conference got over, they wanted to get a cab, but they were not able to get one. And they thought that why is it so difficult, and why on the mobile phone you won't be able to just order, and it should be there at the doorstep. And that was that idea. And Garrett Camp from Canada and Travis as a programmer came in together, designed something which has a value proposition. It has lots of channels. So now it gotten into Uber Eats and Uber Cabs and Uber as a shared. It is available as a network sharing platform, as a mobile app. There are many key partners. All taxi drivers became the stakeholders. There were less resources which got into, except for the designing and the conceptualization. Then there was a revenue stream which was also created. So if it is very heavy, there was surge pricing which rose up to 3 times of an actual price. A concept at that particular time because of the need, and then this was thought to be a pretty bad idea, but then that is how it has become a norm now as we live each day. So there were various customer segments, and there were very key partners, and they made it affordable, and that's the charm. So in Harvard Business Review, there was an article which was published by Chris where they said that teaching smart people how to learn, and that's how the leadership is. There are 10 commandments which they came up. We always need to look for an opportunity. Everybody in the life does get an opportunity to deliver or to excel, and to be open to those opportunities is important. In our daily life, there are lots of chaotic and confusing and perplexing areas, but then we need to sort of keep ourselves self-aware and open. We need to reflect on how did we perform, what did we do, interest others. You need to have some trustworthy friends who would come back to you, provide that feedback. You need to work on the personal improvement, and there are lots of psychometric tests which are available to understand who you are and what are those areas, because sometimes the right brain and the left brain doesn't work together, and the emotions and the realistic attitude has a conflict. But then we need to sort of gather those feedback and transform ourselves, and systematic self reflection would be definitely the key. But what do a leader do? it is important that every institution where the leader works make it psychological safe. And what does that mean? And there is a good standards which have been developed of creating a good psychological health safety in the workplace. So you create a culture which is just, which is equitable, which is non-gender dependent. You create a social support system, and that is what Dr. Vishal just mentioned, that there is a Gurukul Parampara, which is, and then there are mentors which are there for the undergraduates and postgraduates. There is civility, respect. There is a psychological job fit, and that is where we would like to look at the training, the education, and the experience, looks at credentials and privilege them appropriately, but provide a growth and development for everybody. Recognition is a very, very important part, and I have seen this very appropriately with Dr. Vishal, where he recognizes the undergraduates, postgraduates, and the faculty at an appropriate time. So engage and balance and make those areas psychological safe would be very, very key. So it is just not about plain and simple trust and listening, and it is neurosciences which works parallelly, and we need to be sort of aware. Change is always a difficult. If we don't change, change is going to change us. And but what we need to also understand is just behaviorism and humanism is partly archaic. We need to have a particular focus if you need to become a good leader, and then there needs to be a reality check. But what is also important is that we need to be resilient and very, very committed to the goals which we have set in for the institution. So we heard about mentoring, and Dr. Peter Patel very aptly said that this is an area which we need to sort of develop as a great leader. And there is a good grow model which is there, where we need to look at goals, reality, options, and what am I going to willingly do. Do we agree to a specific actions and a time frame, and are we set and look at accountability and reporting. Healthcare right now suffers tremendously with lack of accountability, and because we can easily shift blames, because there are lots of touch points for each patient, and 32 touch points for a patient with an average length of stay in the hospital of 4 days of stay. And that is where we need to look at the current situations and keep groping. Leaders also keep crafting a shared vision. So what we generally do, we mug up. So in undergraduate, postgraduate level, we are very examination ready. And that is where we go wrong. So even the vision and the mission and the quality objectives is mugged within the institution. But it is important to understand that can leaders craft a shared vision so that every employee, faculty and staff basically shares the same growth potential. So be sure to be regularly asking people for their input, provide summaries of their replies, let them know how their input is helping create vision. And that is how if Amrita has a vision of providing a world-class quality care facility with education and research and touching each public with the compassionate care, so each employee should also reflect the same. So there are various ways to improve these strategic skills, and we need to know who are we, think, speak, act. And then there are various models. But what is important is that we keep listening to the voice of customer. So there could be internal and external customer. What do they want? Look at the performance of each stakeholders, and the leaders must be very, very clear about the performance. Keep communicating that goals and expectations, both at undergraduate and the postgraduate and the faculty level, and keep providing that feedback, articulated in a very clear way so that it is interpretive. And this is one of my last slides. It is just not about knowing you. It is just not about trust. It is just not about integrity. You need to also work hard to understand where the world is moving and be prepared. So there are many innovations like digital health. There are work which is happening on nanobots, 3D printing, and Amrita has done fantastic work in robotics, 3D printing. Stethoscope is getting replaced with handheld ultrasound. There are ingestible sensors. There are virtual reality. There are wearable devices. There is organ on a chip. There are microfluidics. there is a lot of work which is also happening in precision health. And if you have heard about your gut microbiome could tell you if you are anxious, depressed, or how do you think, how do you perform, and what is going to happen. And then there are optogenetics, pharmacogenetics, epigenetics. Whole genome sequencing is changing the way we work. And we have seen this with COVID, including CRISPR. There is a lot of big data, which is also sort of coming in, looking at EMR, live health records, bioinformatics. And why I'm telling you this is because it is important to know who we are, to be self-aware, to be resilient, to be sort of focused. But it is also key, if you need to be a good leader, to be future ready. Because that's how we need to be. But there are challenges, as very aptly said by Dr. Peter Patel and Brigadier Bhaskar. Unfortunately, we lack to see mentors on a day-to-day level. So how do we inspire ourselves? And that's where we need to look for those in our day-to-day, in our medical, internal medicine rounds, that a leader who comes on time, who sort of is very open to undergraduates and postgraduates, who lets them speak, who teaches them well, who creates a difference in dignity and respect to the patient, mentoring, leading change, various perspectives. The patients can shout, the faculty can be not happy with you, and you handle that. But the performance should be uniform. It need not be a gender specific or age specific or a geographic specific. But in the end, mind management is the key. And that is where you play a good role. And that is what one question which was basically asked. So that is it from my side. And congratulations for organizing SPUST for the 4th year, Dr. Vishal and the team. And it's always a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you, sir. It was very excellent presentation and very beautifully dealt many topics. And very good thing you said was that you have to, your knowledge base has to be very good as a leader. You can't be, lacking knowledge. You have to be aware of the recent developments. Lifelong learner, very important. And I'm quite sure that, these must be in the minds of many of the students. And actually what you said was like, you yourself have been, involved in a lot of research and have helped us a lot. And you see, even these undergraduates, when last year we took on, I think 64 projects, which I think already now 18 or 19 are published. So, or are about to get published. So, and there will be many more which are in the, process. So actually, when you start the process, you realize that, I was one day myself thinking, if they get into it, after once one article is published, then after that, your momentum is much faster. They will get the publication in much faster. They understand, because it's the first publication which is always a little more challenging. Subsequently, things become easier for the student. And also they meet and various teams form. Then, those teams take the other teams, forwards, and that sort of matrix kind of thing move forward with it. So we are lucky in that regard that there are a lot of people here who are ready to mentor. So we have some questions, Dr. Sanjeev. Dr. Sanjeev, how can we convince others of a new concept when they are used to a certain conventional way of thinking, especially in medicine where new drugs and treatment modalities are introduced on a daily basis?
So thanks for that question. Very, very valid question. I would like to quote the model which Royal College of Psychology and Psychiatrists have. And always everybody in a change model, there would be a pre-contemplation. There will be a contemplation. So like Dr. Vishal would have sent a message that there is a leadership program and so-and-so is going to, there is a pre-contemplation. What do they know? Do they know much more than I do? Then there is a content. They hear Dr. Peter Patel, they hear Brigadier Bhaskar, and they realize it's fantastic. So they start contemplating. Moment they move into, they start preparing, because they hear people like Dr. Vishal, who have been sort of on a ground demonstrating and mentoring. So they start. So what I'm trying to say is we need to change ourselves first. And we are unfortunately always looking for changing others. So if there is a new drug, if there is a new device, if there is a new process, can we first adopt it? And that's what Dr. Vishal gave an example, that they started publishing. So celebrate that success quickly and create that kind of a healthy competition of understanding that, yes, you do research, you then publish. So changing yourself first is the key. Then celebrating that success of adopting that change and making a difference is the next step. And then, as Alexander Fleming did, he created a network. You have to create a like-minded people network so that you create that kind of a change. Unfortunately, things are negative in our day-to-day, and we sort of get into that dopamine, serotonin level of gossips. But then how can you create a like-minded network, and then slowly but surely get into that practice that new drug works, new devices work, it is cost benefit, it is cost effective, there is a utilization factor, there is, and then you have to always keep talking about it. Just saying that like in our practice of antimicrobial stewardship, the microbiologist says the surgeons and physicians don't listen. The surgeons and physicians say the microbiologists don't know how to give the report. When both of them are together in the room, they say the nurses' attrition is so high, they don't practice infection control. When all of them are together in the room, they say the leadership and the management is so poor. So it can all lead to that, but it is important that create a like-minded, first change yourself, create a like-minded team, keep celebrating success and keep talking about it at various forums, and sooner or later it would be adopted.
Thank you, sir. It was very...
Can I add to that, please?
Sure.
Okay. You see, Dr. Sanjeev Singh has really put it very clearly, the process they should do. And that process saying, if you have two, the old treatment or current treatment and a new treatment, when you prepare what you call an evidence-based case paper. So when you do that, you put advantages and disadvantages of current practice. Next to it on the table, revised or new practice, again, advantages and disadvantages. And at the bottom, you present evidence, okay? And if that is either published or presented, then people will look at it side by side, that there is really evidence. So as you can say, you have to actually be able to prove, not saying, in my opinion, this is evidence-based change we must bring together, and the benefits to the patients. And Dr. You have the excellent experience of that, and so has your team. So it's to teach students not to do WhatsApp opinions. Evidence-based. It's as simple as that.
Very good, sir. Very nicely said. So we move on from this, and we have Dr. Arvind Sukumar, IPS. Dr. Arvind Sukumar is a 2016 batch IPS officer, took charge as the new district police chief of Wayanad on 5th February 2021. He has previously served as the superintendent of police information and communication technology at Trivandrum. He is also a medical graduate from Amrita Institute of Medical Science of 2005 batch. Prior to joining IPS, he has served for a short period in the Indian Revenue Service also. Over to Dr. Arvind Sukumar.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Vishal, sir. And all the eminent speakers before me have actually put it quite well regarding leadership. So I would just want to put some of my thoughts and put it across with whatever experience that I have gained in also as a medical graduate and also in the police department. One issue that was already mentioned was the leaders versus managers question. Of course, that has already been dealt quite exhaustively. Leaders are those who have a certain level of social influence. They will have leaders, have followers, and managers have basically subordinates and workers who work because a manager has told them to work. There is no social influence there. So we should aspire to have a certain level of social influence to bring about any sort of change as leaders. Managers are more in tune to keep the status quo. If you want to bring a change, you should be a leader, and to be a leader, you should have that social influence on your followers. So how do you do that? How do you conduct yourself so that others can think of you as a leader? So I'll just briefly touch upon some points. Uh, as sir already said, I was in Amrita in 2005 onwards, 2005 batch. I passed out 2011. I mean, finished my house residency and came out of Amrita in 2011. In 2011, we had the. I mean, I was in Cochin. That's why I'm saying we had the Cricket World Cup. India won the World Cup. I know this is a bit of a digression, but India won the World Cup, and I'm sure you all would have seen the next day newspaper headline where there is a photograph of the team and there's a champion placard and the photograph of the team, and you should see where the captain is standing in that photograph. If you can just Google and see where the captain is standing. Captain is standing at the corner, somewhere in the corner, while the youngest members of the team and the oldest member of the team, they are all huddled together with the cup in the center while the captain is in the corner. So that gives us a very important and important clue as to how the leader should conduct himself. He should be ready to take all the blame for any action of his team, while he should be ready to let the team take the credit for whatever the team has done. That is a very important quality of a leader. And whether it is a unit in the medicine department which is headed by a unit head, if something goes wrong in the something goes wrong, or treatment modality was not properly done or anything like that, I think it is the unit head who should take the responsibility for that, and the unit as such should get the credit if everything goes well. That is a very important quality of a leader, and these things are observed by your subordinates and the people who work with you. That is when they start identifying you as a leader. Otherwise, you're one of them, or you're a manager. But once you start doing such things, you will be identified as a leader, and you will have that social influence to influence them and then bring about a change if you want to bring about a change. Next is regarding moving this change theory forward. We talk about transformational leadership that can bring about a change. I want to talk about a date. 26th of November is actually a very interesting date. That date is basically close to, or basically that date is important in our history for two things. One is regarding individual change or individual leadership bringing about change, and second is how a collective leadership brought about change. I'll talk about the individual leadership first. 26th November is the birth anniversary of Dr. Verghese Kurian. All of us know, he is known as the milkman of India, and he went to Anand in Gujarat, and he was able to mobilize the community there, the milkmen there. He was able to mobilize them, make them into a cooperative. So it was like he was able to exert that social change because of his influence, and he was able to get them into a cooperative, the Amul cooperative, and then it became a national thing. It was a bottom of change that was brought about by one individual, I would say a leader at his level, and he was able to bring up from bottom up the change came. Second thing is more of a collective leadership, and that is not bottom up. It was a top down thing. On 26th November, our country or our nation adopted our constitution, and we gave it to ourselves. And that is an example of a collective leadership of a group of leaders who got elected to Constituent Assembly, who fought for our country's freedom, and they gave the framework of how the country should move forward. And that framework is the constitution. But that was a top-down thing. So it was a top-down change. But in both cases, there was a change and it was transformational. So that change, if it has to come, it has to come through a leader, and the leader can only do it if he has that kind of social influence. If the people who framed the constitution did not have the social influence, the constitution would not have been accepted by the country, but it was, because all of them had a certain level of social influence, although it was not a one person's effort, it was the effort of the entire team. Next is something, of course, all the speakers before me have told about how open we should be regarding opinions when opinions are given, and in a routine manner, in a normal situation, yes, we should be ready to take opinions, we should be ready to take ideas. But there are situations, there are crisis situations where the leader has to stand up and he has to give directions. And that is very important quality of a leader. Imagine this I can give from my own example. You are standing, you are on election duty, you are standing outside a polling booth, and you have your rampant bogus voting going on, and you catch it, and everybody runs from there, and they bring a mob of 500 to 1,000 people who are coming towards you, and your job is to protect the polling booth, and nothing happens to the election. What do you do there? I mean, you cannot at that crisis moment ask your inspectors or your other subordinate or colleagues what to do. You, as the senior most, or as the leader there, you have to take charge and give direction that you do that, you take action, you whatever has to be done, you do. So in crisis situations, you have to be the one who takes the call. Routine, normal situations, which is normally the case in 99% of time, you should be ready to take all the ideas. If the ideas are good, they should be implemented. Innovation should be brought. But always remember, when it's a crisis situation, the person who takes the call automatically becomes the leader of that group. If there is a group of 5 people who are, on the same level, and a crisis comes, the person who takes the call or is ready to take the call and ready to take the responsibility if the call goes wrong automatically becomes the leader of that group. That is how the group dynamics work. And a leader should be able to do that. He should be able to take that call, and he should be able to stand by his decision. The moment you take the call and if it goes on, you again start putting the blame on your subordinate, again you're gone. You're no more a leader. You're just a manager at max, if they want you to be that. So that is something I think we should all understand as leaders. If we want a certain level of social influence, how we should conduct ourselves in crisis situations. Another important thing is, again, there is a Sanjeev sir was just saying how it is when microbiologists and physicians meet, they talk about somebody else. It is never for a leader to actually put the blame on somebody else or on the subordinate. If there's something wrong, the leader will put up his hand and say, yeah, it is my fault, and I take full responsibility for it. That is the most important thing, whether it is whether it is medical leadership or any leadership. You have to be ready to take that blame. If you cannot take that blame, then you will not be looked up by your whether your colleagues or subordinates. So how do we, I mean, how does one become like this? It's easy for me to say, and then that you should be like this, but it's not easy to actually put it in practice. As it was told before, it is more about learning from others. That is where the mentoring concept came. I remember when I joined Amrita, we had a mentoring system. Pratapan sir was my mentor, and we also, I think, by the fag end of my time in Amrita, there was a system because there were some seniors were mentoring the juniors, and that kind of thing was there. So if you have a very good mentor, then he would actually be able to mold the person in a way that he can become a leader. But it's important to choose the right mentors. Most of the time what happens is a mentor is chosen keeping only one aspect in mind. For example, if I have to choose a mentor in, I'm a first year medical student, I want a mentor, someone from third year who is really good at studies is made my mentor. Generally that is how it is. But or he may be someone who is abiding by the rules fully and you make him the mentor. So I personally feel a mentor should be one who everybody accepts is a leader in the way he conducts himself. So if you put leaders as mentors, they will be able to impart certain qualities which will help others become leaders as well. It's very dicey thing choosing mentors, and I personally feel that it should be left to the the, the team that selects the mentor. It should be left to them to decide what are the indexes that should qualify as the markers for selecting a mentor. But the most important index is whether he is someone who can or who is a leader in your eyes. If he is, then he should be made a mentor. Generally what happens is someone who is a leader is considered to be a troublemaker at times, but not all leaders are troublemakers. So it's very important to have a leader as a mentor to develop these leadership qualities. Now, how do you identify someone as a leader? Another thing is, as it was said before, you should have immense knowledge base. Your awareness about things should be such that people look up to you for everything. If you know your field, you automatically become a leader in that field because of the credibility that you bring in. But that is not all, as I said. So generally, when we select mentors, we see, okay, someone who studies well, he has knowledge base, he's got a good command over the subject, let's make him a mentor. But that is not all. That is an important aspect, but there are other things as well. But it is definitely important. You should know your subject thoroughly. A leader has to be a leader or to develop those qualities, you have to be aware as to what is happening around you. You have to be aware of each and every instant of any action that is happening. I remember when I was in medicine, there were there were my batchmates who were aware as to what is happening in and around the campus, what is happening outside. They were aware as to where a particular case is there, where a particular patient is there. These are not like when I say awareness, I don't want you to be aware of world affairs, but you should be aware of what is happening around you, so that when an issue crops up, when a situation comes where you have to take a call, you are aware of the situation and you are in a position to take a you will not be able to give any directions. And again, you as a leader will not blossom as a leader. So you should be aware. Next is you should be observant. You should be, there's a difference between being aware and being observant. Awareness can be from any the information that comes from any quarter. Being observant is to observe the sights and sounds around you. You should, again, it is all adding up to the information base that you have. So if you observe as to what is happening, it's like how we go to a patient and we observe the signs and symptoms, and we have to be very careful in observing so as to come to a diagnosis. We have to be observant of what is happening around us for two things. One is, of course, to increase of information base. Secondly, if you want to have a certain amount of social influence over people around you, you should be able to observe the people around you, understand the group dynamics, understand your audience, and then only you can have that influence over them. If I can take the example of Mahatma Gandhi. He is a pioneer of social action, and how he is able to conduct social action is because he had that influence on everybody. And how he got the influence? Because he is able to connect with people. He observed how people of India were. He molded himself, his outreach to them. He used to clothe himself in a way that the others would relate to him. So he understood whom he was addressing to by observing them. In fact, when he came to India from South Africa, first thing he did was to take the entire tour of the country, to observe the country, to observe what was happening throughout the country, to see what was happening, to see the people. And after that observation has helped him to understand the people, at the same time increase his knowledge base by which he could do what he did, that we are all aware of. It is also interesting. I mean, when we work in small groups, this was a more broader thing, but when we work in small groups, when you are working as a team in a unit, whether it is medicine or surgery, you should understand the group dynamics so that you are able to convey your messages to everybody in a proper manner. That again is a quality that has to be developed, but to some people it comes naturally, but otherwise it can be developed. The most, I mean, underlying factor of all this to have, we have something called emotional intelligence. In psychology, it's a very important term, emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is something that is the bedrock of all sort of social influence mechanisms. And emotional intelligence is something that needs to be cultivated, that can be cultivated by, again, by mentors, by proper child rearing practices, so that person is emotionally aware. And then of course an emotionally aware person will be able to take the decisions that have to be taken, and will be able to influence the people in the right manner. So basically, this is, I have not made a presentation. I'm sorry. And I am not as academically. I mean, the presentations before me were quite exhaustive. So I wanted to make it much more brief. And this is what I have observed from my work in the position I am in. In the place I am in, I am in charge of the police force in the district, which is almost around 1,050 policemen a year. So I am sort of, by virtue of the position, I am the manager here. But the idea is to conduct myself in a manner that everybody starts to follow you, not just because you are the SP, but because you are conducting yourself in a manner. So most of us will find ourselves in certain positions as we go up. Most of the my young friends are sitting here, undergrads, postgrads, role where they'll be in position of authority, whether as an HOD or whether as a unit head, whether as a dean, or so on and so forth. So because of the position, they will be able to exert a certain level of influence. But I would urge all of them to actually go beyond the position that they are in and be able to exert a certain level of social influence, which will give them followers, which will give them people who will dedicatedly carry out the ideas, the shared vision, as it was told before, rather than who are people who just go by your directions because you're in the road. I think the current principal in Amrita is a good example that all the my young friends can emulate. He is someone who is there. He is in a position, but at the same time, it is not his position that actually makes people do what he wants them to do, or makes people carry out the shared vision that is there. It is because of his influence, and that just shows how his leadership how his leadership has led. So I think that's all from my side. Thank you so much, sir, for calling me for this interaction. I hope I was of some use to my friends here, and I was also enriched by listening to the eminent speakers who spoke before me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Arvind. It was very well. The way you covered the subject was very good. What you said about mentorship, awareness, observation, influence, I think very beautiful things you brought out actually. And these, I'm sure the students will be very much benefited. You are alumnus of this college, and if you remember, once we called you, I think you were in Pala that time, and Vicom, I think that time, 3 years back, when suicide had occurred, and 2 years, I remember, it was somewhere around that time. That was something
Yeah,
which
yeah,
was
2 years.
2 years back. It was playing on our mind, and we had something, and I was very keen that you come and speak. And you, in spite of whatever your challenges, a lot of work was there, but you took out time and addressed the students. I think it's very nice of you to have come down, because I think something which comes from the alumnus is always very, very valuable at such times, when so. Yeah, that's something very interesting. And as I see sometimes, what you said about mentorship, I was observing in the first year MBBS. I went and yeah, please, I saw some the I was just finding that the motivation level was low, so I requested somebody in pediatric cardiology, one of our professors, Mahesh. He is an expert in 3D printing. I requested him to address that. Sometimes what happens when they go into something different, sort of motivation comes in, and I found there's some change. They were like, they were asking me, sir, you want to see the lab and all that. So sometimes you just you got to look at ways to motivate people, because all this COVID online education has also demotivated a lot of people. Actually, that is something which is there to see it. So there are some questions for you. I just want to ask you, for Dr. Arvind. Whenever we make a call in a tough situation, there will always be a group of people who may not agree with our approach to the situation. How can we bring them along with our plan to avoid conflicts and ensure unity?
Yeah, so that's a good question that is always there. Whenever we take a decision or whenever we choose to take a decision, there will always be a group which doesn't agree with what you're saying. In fact, there's something in psychology called post decision dissonance. Like even the person who takes a decision at times has some dissonance, but when a tough situation comes, you have to take that call. As I said, many times you may not have the opportunity, neither would you have the time to actually take everyone on board. Sometimes you have to take the call then and there, and you just have to go with what you think is right. Because if you try to convey or if you try to convince everybody, by that time, that moment where you have to take that call would have gone and the crisis would have blown up and maybe become a disaster. So most of the times you don't have the time, but you should stick by what you think is right. That again comes from whatever awareness, whatever knowledge that you have about the situation. You take the call. Once you've taken the call, there will be a group that will say this is the wrong decision, this is not right. You say you can always defend yourself by whatever you thought was right, and there will be people who will contradict you, saying no, it was not right. Fair enough, that is what I thought was right. And of course, whatever subsequently happens by the call that you have taken is going to substantiate whatever you thought was right or not. Maybe it will go in your favor, maybe it will not go in your favor. Either ways, if you have decided to go by something as per your knowledge and your conviction, you stand by it. You try to convince people by telling them the information that was there at your hand and what you thought was correct. Most people actually, if are properly communicated to, will understand, but there are some people who always uh, have a difference of opinion. You just have to agree to disagree for those some people. But I think most people, if you communicate to them the reasons behind why you took that call and what was the conviction behind that decision and that tough scenario, by explaining the scenario first, I think 99% people will agree with you. But there will be some who don't agree with you. You just have to let that be. Provided that all your decisions are actually based on information, correct information as far as you know, your knowledge base for that competence that you are at, and the conviction that you have with regards to solving that problem. So I think once you do that, that should be it.
There's another question actually, which, basically for you as well as for Brigadier Bhaskar. So I'll first ask you to handle it, then Brigadier Bhaskar. What are the hurdles we must get over mentally if we try to pursue a career in civil services or armed forces?
Okay, I can answer the part about civil service. The biggest hurdle that most people mentally have is that I have spent 5 years studying medicine, which I would have gotten into medicine by again preparing for that entrance exam, and then I prepared so much, got into medicine. I got into medicine. Now I am an MBBS doctor. Now for me to completely change the stream and going into something is something that your mind will always tell you, is that the way to go? And of course, there will be people around you also will say the same thing, that you have studied medicine so much. Why do you want to completely change your career? So that this question is the generic question that will come if you change your career from medicine to whether it is being in a uniform service or being in any other career path that you choose. This question will always be there. It depends on the your conviction as to what you want to do going ahead in life. If I have to give my example, I did my medicine. After doing medicine, I had to introspect, reflect as to how much the subject enticed me. I would get a sort of a high when I administer some drug, I do some treatment, and I used to feel that when I used to go to camps and internship and all. When I give the medicine, somebody felt good and came and told me, "Doctor, your medicine has helped." I used to feel really good about it. But at the same time, if I was in the hospital and there is a very rare syndrome and that case is there in the pediatric ward, and then all my batchmates are running towards that case to see whether that case is, to see the signs and the symptoms and all that, I was never one of those who would run. That did not attract me, and I was able to reflect and was able to bring out this difference. That what helped, what really I liked was the service part. When I gave service and somebody was happy, I was happy about that, and not as much about the subject. So I could have continued in medicine, and I would have, because I have to know the subject more, I would have been a decent enough medical practitioner. I think like that. But I don't think I would have gotten that high that I used to get when I gave that medicine to that person. So that was the conviction in my mind, and that's why I decided to change and try to go into services. And once you have decided, once you're mentally you have got clarity as to what you want to do, I think after that, whether it is your mental doubt or whether if somebody else puts these questions to you, you will be able to answer that quite well. And so I think that clarity, the mental clarity has to be there as to what you want, and that will come only with a lot of reflection and introspection as to what do you really want. You should be truthful to yourself as to what do you really want, what really gave you that satisfaction. And once you are able to identify that, you can go in that direction, and I am sure that whoever does that will be able to succeed.
Thank you. That was very well answered. Now over to Brigadier Bhaskar. Again, the question, what are the hurdles we must get over mentally if we try to pursue a career in civil services or armed forces?
Okay, Vishal, to answer your question, a very important word is in the question itself, is what are the mental hurdles. So ultimately, most of the hurdles are mental. Because once a person is selected and medically examined and found to be fit, that means the physical hurdles are not there. The doctors feel that he is definitely capable of withstanding the rigors of training and life thereafter. The mental hurdles can be of many types. A few things one has to accept, and actually, it's a very small price to pay for the type of satisfaction that you get out of the job and the other minor perks and all which go with the job. First and foremost, one has to understand, one has to accept the reality that armed forces is not just a career, it's a profession. One has to understand a subtle difference between the two. Unless if you have an absolutely professional outlook and not viewing it just as a money making instrument, you will be able to enjoy the life much more. You will be able to get your job satisfaction to the extent that you want, and you will be able to do justice to the requirements of the profession. Yes, there are things one has to remember. Firstly, the discipline standards are much more exacting. There can be absolutely no compromise. It I am absolutely convinced about it. A lot of our fundamental rights, like other citizens, we forego. And when people, especially those who are not from an armed forces background or not had much of exposure, when they join the army right in the beginning of the training, it's in fact a sort of a cultural shock that they get. But with time, one understands the logic, the reasoning, the meaning behind all these very so-called peculiar kind of a culture that we have, peculiar practices that we have, traditions that we have. All of them have a meaning. Nothing is without a meaning. Nothing has come overnight without a thought. All of them actually build the spirit and that camaraderie, which is essential for anyone to win a war. A lot of privileges and perks are there, but they come with a lot of responsibility. And I would like to clarify one thing that while the life may be difficult, the organization looks after us very well, us and our family in terms of the facilities. But more than that, in extreme cases, when an officer is say posted in a field area, in some cases, if he is injured in a warlike situation or in counterinsurgency operations, he is looked after very well. You yourself have been in the armed forces. You understand the top quality of medical services which we get right up to the front line. My own unit officer, Dr. Rajesh Adav, he promised before the Kargil war that everyone who reaches me, if he's injured, I'll save him, and he kept his word. Anyone who reached him, he saved his life. There was not a single case of death. Now, the other thing is that the some of the new movies which have come, they are definitely giving a more correct picture of what armed forces is. Otherwise, the typical image of an army officer was like what was shown in the erstwhile movies of a colonel with the the spectacles, big mustaches, golf cap, walking stick, and a dog going ahead of him. That's what the possibly the image has been built over a period of time. Armed forces is much more than that. That may be a very small part uh, that comes at a much later stage of life. So people should be prepared for a slightly different life, but a slightly different or very different life also is not something which they can't handle. In fact, that is what will give them the pride. And I think at some stage or other, beyond the pay and perk, everyone does look for some kind of a pride in his profession, some kind of a satisfaction that he can derive. To that extent, army provides a lot of opportunities. And one last thing, some people do have that feeling that once we join the armed forces, we don't have to study. In fact, a lot of people used to join only because they thought they won't have to study or because they were weak in maths. Uh, Studies are never ending because, as I said, learning is never ending. And learning, not only bookish learning, but also what we learn from our day to day experiences, each and everything is important. So these are the things which I could think of as to the likely mental hurdles which one can overcome. And these are the ways which I think one can.
As we come towards the end of the panel discussion, I think we'll request the panelists to give their closing remarks. We'll start with Dr. Peter Patel, sir.
Okay. Here we have few challenges which the panelists and the students may have to review or would look at. A particular aspect that comes up is bullying, harassment, equality, and discrimination. Okay. And that happens from undergraduate all the way into employment. How does a leader deal with that? That's a major challenge, okay? The other one is that your mentor, okay, and your peer group, choose them correctly and make sure that they are not yes men, okay? Not they actually saying, make him sort of feel good. They must be critical, but constructive criticism is more important than just sort of, building your ego, okay? The other one is that a mentor, can we look at mentor as a coach or leader as a coach rather than a leader whom you worship? That is something very important. And the final one, which always comes up, is theft of your ideas. So if you actually have a very good innovative idea or change, but you disclose it too early, they're worried about the senior managers or they steal your ideas, present it to the board as their own, and the juniors lose out on it. So these are some of the challenges which I come across practically every year with various people whom I actually enable. So those are my key comments on this one, please.
Thank you, sir. That was very nice of you, sir. I will request Brigadier Bhaskar to give his closing remarks.
A lot of things have already been brought out by all the eminent speakers, Vishal. One thing which, at the cost of repetition, which I think was a very apt point brought out by every speaker, is the need for a mentor. And Mr. Arvind brought out very, very correctly that selecting a mentor is equally important. You should not end up selecting a wrong. You should have the right qualitative requirements in your mind when you select a mentor. Second thing which I brought out, one of the biggest challenges is the dynamic environment in which we live today. Everything changes, including the leadership styles, the leadership principles. To that extent, the flexibility of mind and willingness to learn at all times in every situation is very, very important. And the point which Mr. Arvind brought out in that context, or when he was answering a question about taking everyone on board, I absolutely agree with him that it will not be possible for everyone to be agreeing with you, because for taking the best decision, you require all the time which you may not have. So it's always better to take a decision, right or wrong, than not taking a decision at all. Because when you start implementing the decision, even if there are some gray area, loopholes, as you implement, you will keep realizing where you are wrong and you can take corrective action. Whereas not taking a decision at all is definitely going to lead to disaster. And looking for leadership opportunities in every walk of life, I think it is something which unknowingly, possibly we have been doing, but excellently brought out by Dr. Sanjeev. This is something like it may look that in my concluding remarks, I'm only seeing what others have said, but because I felt that they were very, very apt new learning for me also. So this was a very excellent point brought out by Dr. Sanjeev of looking for opportunity, however small, in every situation, however trivial it may look like, is very, very important. So most important, I feel, is one should accept these challenges, analyze them, realize them, and prepare in a very small measure every day so that we can grow and be capable of meeting the leadership challenges of the future.
Thank you, sir. It was excellent, sir. Very useful concluding remarks. And now request Dr. Sanjeev Singh to give his closing remarks.
Thank you, sir. And brilliant past program organized under your leadership. So this is where we recognize that there are leaders available, there are mentors available, and it was so good to share platform with such fantastic gentlemen who shared their thoughts. If I reflect, I think undergraduate, postgraduate, medical students, unfortunately, are very exam ready. and they are very examination based. And that is where I think we need to sort of change our outlook. We need to be uh, ready for the community, and to be able to understand that it is just not the passing those examinations, but practically handling every bit of situations. There would be an emergency, looking at the status epilepticus, status asthmaticus coming at ER, a COPD of exacerbation coming at ER, and how would you immediately react? It may not be the things which have come at your examination level. So it is important to critically think that are we preparing ourselves to be able to face the world? It is also important to be resilient, because things are changing, and it is not a very watershed compartment and written in stone. It is always changing. We have seen this, the digitalization and the technology introduction into healthcare, and which has led to a lot of precision in medicine, is changing. So we need to be sort of resilient and understand what works. As a, I think right now at an undergraduate, postgraduate level, it is important to be also empathetic. Because this patient who comes in, as Dr. Arvind was mentioning, that there is a new case in a medical ward, and everybody sort of jumps in and looks at that ward, and then looks at there is one person, medical student, who's going to get a chance to present it. But it is also important to understand the pain which the patient goes through, and can we sort of longitudinally take care of him and selflessly deliver what is expected to be delivered as a medical personnel, not just as an important. It is also critical to understand what do we want to achieve in life. Is it the money factor? Is it the reputation? Is it selfless service? It is just doing good. So perseverance to that thought would be also important. And above all, to remain positive. I think there are lots of challenges, lots of negative thoughts, lots of times where we sort of break down and think that it's a doomsday, but there is an opportunity to sort of give back to the society, and what best could be done other than the armed forces, and what Dr. Arvind does, what Dr. Peter does, and what as a medical professional we have been given. So it was such a great pleasure to listen to all the panelists, and also Dr. Vishal, to see how beautifully you have organized this whole conference.
Thank you, sir. Now I request Dr. Arvind Sukumar to IPS to give his concluding remarks.
First of all, sir, thank you so much for inviting me as a panelist for this. It was an enriching experience. Um, I have heard all the speakers and ideas that were given, and it was really enriching for me. It was also nice to see Sanjeev sir after so long. Um, uh, I think all the points have been already mentioned. But one thing that I want to highlight is, amongst the doctors, there are leaders who have come up in the past 2 years. I have seen in the field during this pandemic how almost all of them have stepped up, and they are all leaders in their own right. And the opportunity presented itself in the form of COVID, and I think the entire medical fraternity stood up, and all of them were leaders. I am right now in a district where we have a lot of population that are tribes, and it's difficult to even it's you can imagine it's difficult how to get vaccination to them. But I am very happy to actually share with you that Wayanad is having the first dose vaccination is 100% amongst the tribes, and the second dose vaccination almost 73% till the last time I saw the figures. So all that is because of the commitment and dedication of the medical fraternity. All of us, the police and the revenue department, all of us are there, but it is at the end of the day, it is the effort of the medical fraternity that has helped us during COVID. And there are so many leaders who are probably unsung leaders. There's so many of them. So I just want to emphasize that there is an opportunity always there. And amongst all of my friends who are listening to this, there are there is a leader in each one of you. Just have to, uh, as I said, you just have to look vicariously, find out what skills are there, and then if from our side, if they can be given that mentor who can mold them, I'm sure we will have leaders who will transform our country, which still needs a lot of transformation to become one of those developed and well-to-do nations. And that transformational change will come from our my friends who are sitting here, and I'm very confident of that. I've seen that in the past 2 years, and I'm sure that will carry forward. Thank you so much, sir, and thank you again for calling me for this.
So thank you very much. I thank all our speakers, our panelists who joined us in spite of their busy schedules on a Sunday, and enlightening the it's a very large number of students who end up, basically the numbers now, and basically it's live streamed, and a lot of later also on YouTube. What I was told was last year was around 2100. So it's a big this kind of leadership challenge. I think panel discussion is very useful for the students, and also for the, I think it's for everyone, not students, for faculty, everyone, because there are so many things which are discussed. And basically I also realized one thing over like it's on the job training, like like when I was in army, when I came here, when this is the first time I actually was in a undergraduate teacher actually, because otherwise I was always a PG teacher, because the institutes I worked, I was not posted to AFMC as a faculty member. So except for the short when I did my MD there, so we used to interact with the UGs, more of a like supporting them. What I realized that it's basically, you realize each man is a, everybody is no man is an island, and each man, each woman, each lady, each student is a mind of his own. They have their own challenges, their own problems, and all. Somewhere you need to as I think somebody said, no, that should be available, and it's very important. Should be able to identify and what are the problems. In fact, if we identify the problem, then we can there is our ability to sort it out is not a problem. Identification is a problem. Sometimes when you lose, when you are not able to pick up, that is where. So we do try our best, and you're right, as we all know, drop in performance, poor grades, we keep a very close track of that. And we would threaten them actually if they don't do well, and we would tell them that you won't be able to appear for the exam. So like put the sort of from the beginning you have to be after them, because eventually if you don't do well at the early stages in your university exams, and you can't suddenly come and get a gold medal. We all know that. So, and the NEET, next, and all are very competitive exams, so it requires a lot of. That's why what has pointed out by Dr. Peter Patel, and was also pointed out by all the other speakers also, about having excellent knowledge of your subject is a very important thing for being a good leader. A person, like how can you motivate your the people under you if you are working with you whom when you yourself are not sure of your own subject. So I thank everyone. Even the questions were very nice, and I'm sure some may be coming. We will send it to you, take your thing and get it back to them. That would definitely be our endeavor. So on behalf of all of us here, we thank you all, and I'll request the team to be here. Just if you can come in next 2-3 minutes, all of you, you could we could just introduce you all to our panelists. One of our organizing secretary was COVID positive, so he could not come for the last part. Nevin Palal, but he done very good work. Then come, Ajo, please. Arunima Chellappan was the master of ceremony, and you can remove your mask for a minute. Amalendu is the organizing secretary. Arati is co-organizing secretary. Yatish Reddy is also in the management, and then Sritu, then can I raise your hand so that they would know Sritu, yeah. Then Samyukta, Steve, and Isaac, and Gokul, yeah, Gokul. So that's the team out here. And Dr. George Matthew John is sitting. He is also part of the team. Then there are our AV team, Mrs. Jani, and then there is Mano, yeah, Vishwas. Vishwas is also the tall gentleman who has joined in now. He's one of the key members, co-organizing secretary. So in behalf of all of us, we thank you very much, sir, and look forward to meeting you in the coming days. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Vishal.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
लीव कैसे होता है? अच्छा नहीं, वो निकल गया, अपने आप निकल गया मेरे ख्याल से. या स्टॉप.